Rich, this is so compelling. I suggest we stop the podcast right there. In the article that Rich just showed is hard evidence that your tax money is funding officially certified terrorist organizations. And so therefore, that makes you criminally liable.
Using Wi-Fi without NordVPN could mean sharing your private stuff with more people than you think. NordVPN. Online security starts with a click.
This was tweeted a couple of days ago, where the UK government has announced £11 million in aid for al-Qaeda-controlled Syria. UK Labour Party are directly funding militant Islam. Now, I object to this. I object to my government funding war versus looking after our own people. I want to let people know that the British government is breaking its own laws. So this is the Terrorism Act. This is from the legislation.gov.uk, and people can look it up for themselves. Section 15, a person commits an offence if he invites another to provide money or other property and intends that it should be used or has reasonable cause to suspect that it may be used for the purposes of terrorism. So if HMRC or any government agency come to you for money, they are violating this act, because some of this money is going to go to the head choppers in Syria or to support the murder of people in Israel, in the Middle East, in Ukraine. And a person commits an offence if he knows or has reasonable cause to suspect that it will or may be used for the purposes of terrorism. So then if you give money to a government agency knowing that some of that money is going to go for promoting terrorism, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, then you're also committing a criminal offence. And if you want to put a stop to that, then please go to propertycode.com, where you can withhold your tax lawfully as a protest against war. Tom, Alex, anything you want to say about this?
Rich, this is so compelling. I suggest we stop the podcast right there. No, but I'm serious. I'm not serious. Of course, we're going to go on chatting, but this is so important and so compelling and ties into the news that you just cited perfectly. I think this is scandalous.
Well, after giving $3 billion to Zelensky the day after he got elected,
they don't have any money left. I mean, this is to give you a state of the perilous state of British finances. Actually, what I would say on this is you'll note that they did this after they had this aid lined up. They had this talking point lined up after the coup was enacted. And now they are the quote unquote lawful government in Syria. So now they're not funding terrorists. They're not actually, in their minds, in violation of this code, because they're now working with the legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate government in Syria. This is the way these people operate. It doesn't mean they're not supporting terrorism. It just means exactly what I just.
Very good point.
You know, they may tell that to themselves, but
yes.
HTS has been on the U.S. State Department's official list of terrorist organizations since at least 2018, and the Zelensky 2.0 there with a towel on his head.
Yep.
That guy has been on a wanted terrorist list of the U.S. State Department since 2003. And still, to this day, has a $10 million bounty on his head. So there is no way for the UK government to in any way excuse themselves and to say like, oh, well, we didn't know, or now, now that they're in the government offices, now they're no longer terrorists, or any of that sort of nonsense.
Here's the fun part. Did the Brits ever put them on the terrorist watch list?
Did they? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Tom, you raise a good argument, because that's what they may say in their defence, except there's the International Criminal Court Act, which says that it's an offence against the law of England and Wales for a person to commit genocide, a crime against humanity, or a war crime. Now, by killing Alawites and Druze and Shia, the way that they are, they're in violation of this statute, and it's a criminal offence to give money for the funding and facilitation of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. So I really do invite people, at the very least, to go and investigate. Check out propertycode.com and take a look at this and how you can take a stand against what this tyrannical government are doing, because they're destroying British society, and it's all quite deliberate. Until
there's an actual adjudication of that in some kind of court that they recognize, which they would never recognize a judgment from a court that would do that. That's going to be that's their quote unquote legalistic out. It's anti-human. It's disgusting. It's all the things that it's all of that. And I hear your voice breaking up, Rich. I can feel it, and don't think that I'm not, I don't share that level of disgust. These people have crossed our disgust circuit at every level for years. It's how they've always used our discuss circuits against people that they want to marginalize. So the whole nuts and sluts concept, right, of, hey, let's turn this guy into a drug dealer or a pedophile or this or that in order to get rid of somebody that they don't like, and they then drag their name through the mud. And they use that as a means by which to justify and create the outrage, to move the Overton window, to do what it is that they want to do. And then when they actually do it themselves, no, we have legal cover for this. This is not, they're not terrorists in our eyes. The Americans can think what they want. It's just nonsense. It's this is what narcissists do. This is what abusive people do. This is what psychopaths do. They never take responsibility for for their actions, and they always try to obfuscate and then throw their disgusting behavior back on you as some kind of some kind of fault. Because you have shame and they don't. You feel emotions and they can only ape them. And it's very important to remind ourselves that that's what we're dealing with. And it is at every level. That's what we're dealing with. That's the kind of people that we're dealing with. And because we're dealing with people like that, one, it makes them very predictable, and two, it also sadly makes them predictably vile.
Yep.
And so we can figure out what they're going to do next because we know what they're going to do. Makes our jobs actually a little easier when they act like this.
Just one thing: the British government, the cabinet, never actually has to worry about legality of anything they do, because in the British system of government, they are actually entirely entitled to act outside of the law. And you've never seen in Britain anybody sue the government because of the dodgy dossier, the claims about 45 minutes, Saddam Hussein's missiles striking London in 45 minutes. None of that stuff. They are completely scot-free. Nothing ever comes to court. They're never persecuted. No government official is arrested over these things. The law-based society is for the lower classes, but there the law is for real. And what Rich just pointed out, you're actually breaking the law if you give the government your money, your taxes, because there, in the article that Rich just showed, is hard evidence that your tax money is funding officially certified terrorist organizations by the US State Department. And so therefore, that makes you criminally liable.
Yep.
Of course, the government will not pursue you because you paid taxes to them.
But I do know that people are using the probity code process successfully as a form of tax protest. And the other thing that it does, given how the British government and all the other Western governments are printing money like crazy and raising costs of everything like energy, it gives us more money to be able to get by. So it does have that advantage.
But Rich, what specifically does Probity Co. recommend? If you go there on your site and you read through it, what concrete action does it recommend for an ordinary person to do?
Well,
and does this work for other countries as well?
It works for the UK. It may work in other places depending upon how they've ratified legislation against terrorism or genocide. The UK has ratified those international treaties. And what happens in the UK, on probityco.com's website, you download a trust document which says that HMRC are the primary beneficiaries. They can have this money provided they can demonstrate that none of it will be used for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and terrorism. Now, you send a copy of that document. You don't send any money. You just send a copy of that document after it's being witnessed or perhaps notarized by a solicitor. And then HMRC have a certain time which you can say to demonstrate that they're acting in compliance with those statutes. Now, I've actually used this myself. And over the course of a year, HMRC haven't contacted me for a couple of months now because there was back and forth. They kept saying you have to pay tax by law. And I said, yes, I understand. I want to pay tax by law. I want to do the right thing. I want to act consistent with statute. But do I have an exemption against these provisions? And do you? At no point did they give me any exemptions. None whatsoever. So then I presented them with an affidavit saying that this matter is now settled because I'm acting consistent with statute. You got 14 days to rebut the affidavit. They didn't rebut it within 14 days. An unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in law. I sent them a notice of default saying you haven't rebutted the affidavit. The matter is now settled. It's over. I haven't heard from them for 2 months now. I interviewed a guy who runs a couple of hair salons. He owes them thousands and thousands of pounds, corporation tax, VAT, payroll tax, which he's done with the employees of his who are willing for it to be withheld, and he hasn't heard from them since February. The information that I'm getting from Probity Co., and they have regular calls every other Monday evening, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., is as far as I know, no one has been prosecuted by HMRC using this process. And my read of it is they just don't have a way around because the Supreme Court has ruled the Terrorism Act applies to all agencies and activities of the government, even when approved by Parliament. And in the International Criminal Court Act, Section 78 says this act applies to all agencies and agents of the government as it applies to any other person. There's no exemption.
Then my understanding is that this should actually work in every country that has ratified the Terrorism Act, which is a United Nations law, right? Which is actually a majority of nations around the world, correct?
Yes, and the Convention Against Genocide.
And the Convention Against Genocide.
Wherever that's been ratified into domestic law, this will apply. And trust law, I understand, is international as well. Trust law in the UK is older than the Magna Carta. It's that embedded in our legal and lawful system. So yes, thank you.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Actually, that could actually take the oxygen out of the war machine.
Yeah, well, we got to do. I mean, they're going to print the money anyway. We got to do what we can to peacefully,
Well,
legally,
at the
lawfully.
very least, the money that you have is going to stay exactly where it belongs in your hands, not theirs.
Yeah.
And let them print the money, and then turn around and say, "Well, we have to default on all our debt in order to continue to fund all of our grand plans for world domination." And that's fun. That's phenomenal. That's great. That's fun. There are going to be some people called the bond holders and the bond buyers. They're the ones who are going to call bullshit on that eventually. And as of this afternoon, I'm watching the bond markets today, and I'm like,
When you say that, Tom, but you saw this.